Good evening, and welcome to the Chambers County Library System program for summer gardening. My name is Lynette Parsons, and I am a certified Texas Master Gardener. For what that's worth, that means that I have had extensive training thanks to the Texas AgriLife Extension Service, which of course you probably know as the county agent. I took my training in Galveston County, and I have been doing volunteer efforts ever since. People call with questions. I work a gardening hotline. People have asked me to come and do site visits, and that's the sort of thing that Texas Master Gardeners do. So enough about that. This is the first attempt that the library system has had to do some form of programming on Facebook Live. As a result, we're winging this. And in case there are any technical difficulties, just hold on and we'll give it our best shot to get back online as soon as possible. If you do have some gardening at 409-267-2554 while the program is on. And if you are watching this on Facebook Live as we are filming, you can of course do a message on the screen and we will try and answer it then. So let's get to the program. First of all, I have a couple of things to note, and it has to do with our library system, our wonderful library system. They do have several books that are, one is my Bible here, and the Texas Gulf Coast. They have been produced in 1929. It is an amazing book. It's just, I refer to it constantly. So there are multiple copies at each of the library branches. And of course, the library is now doing curbside delivery. So you can call in or put in a reserve for a book, and they will then deliver it to you in your car starting next week. There is also another book that is up here on display. It's right up here, Doug Welch's Texas Garden Almanac. And it is a wonderful resource for a month-by-month breakdown of things to do in your garden in Texas. I will mention those two, and then I have one more thing that I do want to mention as far as looking something up, and that is Texas Superstars. If you are inclined to do any exploring on materials, plants for your yard that have proven the test of time with Texas A&M. They have researched plants and particular varieties of plants that work well all over Texas in our wonderful heat, our crazy monsoons, and various climatic and environmental conditions. The Texas Superstar website is just that, texassuperstar.com, and it is a wonderful resource for looking for things. They will tell you how big things grow, when they flower, etc. They go from bushes and trees all the way down to annual plants. Highly recommended. Now, I do have a couple of questions. The first one has to do with a issue of black stuff all over a gardenia bush. And this gardenia bush is just covered in this black stuff. And the lady tried washing it off, and that didn't work. And I can tell you that this black stuff is very common in our area, and it not only hits gardenias, it will hit crepe myrtles, it will hit citrus, it will hit a variety of ornamentals and all. It is called black sooty mold. Black sooty mold is actually a mold that grows because you have an insect problem. The insects are either scale or they are aphids of some sort. If you see little white flies flying around your bush, those are like aphids. If you see very teeny tiny little dots of white sitting on your leaves, those are probably scale of one sort or another. They are both sucking insects, and they live on their little plant, and when they pee, they secrete what is in our gardening world called honeydew. The honeydew is actually what the sooty mold feeds on. So obviously it's a sequence. If you get rid of the sucking insect, then you will get rid of the sooty mold fungus. The ornamental trees and bushes, like your gardenias, can easily be taken care of either with an all-season horticultural spray or with something called a systemic insecticide. Now, the systemic insecticide is something like a drench, like you put it in the ground around the bush, water it in. The insecticide is taken up by the roots of the plant, and it goes through the plant, and then when the sucking insects start to attack the leaves, then they will pick up some of that insecticide and die as a result. The systemic insecticide is not ideal for plants that you are going to eat something off of. For example, your citrus, blueberry bushes, things of that nature. You can, however, use the systemic insecticide on something like a citrus tree once a year. I usually do it about January before bud break. You can use it the same way, but you do not want to use it more than once. So that's one option. I mentioned the all-season horticultural oil. There are a variety of products that are out there that are horticultural oils, and these are sprays, and you spray them all over the bush, and once again, it will get rid of the sucking insect, and then after they're gone, the sooty mold will basically just dry up and flake off. And it does. Once it flakes off, it looks sort of like ashes that are coming off of your leaves. And a good hard rain will knock them off once that problem is solved. So that's our first problem for today. We have another one. This is for a hybrid rose. Actually, this variety is called Neil Diamond, and it is owned by a very avid Neil Diamond fan. And she is concerned because she has had blooms in the springtime, but she had not had blooms after that. There are a variety of reasons that you can consider. About 90% of the things that happen to plants are environmentally related. So it could be an issue of the soil. And that is usually, if it's not a drainage issue, for example, it can be what the soil contains. So that's where fertilizing comes in. Particularly with things like roses, where you have flowering items that you want to keep flowering, you do need to keep feeding the plant. And so a good rose-specific fertilizer in this case would probably help a lot. There are also some other environmental issues, like if the roses tend to like sun, and if they aren't getting quite enough sun, then they might not trigger blooming as well. But generally, roses are pretty happy. They like a well-draining soil. They like a little nourishment once in a while, and they do like their sun and their water. So hopefully that will take care of those issues there. We may have another question here. Nope, don't have one there. Did you have a question? Okay, all right. Well, moving right along. Last year we did a summer reading program for gardening in the heat. And there are a couple of items out of gardening in the heat that I thought might be appropriate for you all to consider. And they have to do with PPEs and things. But in this case, it has to do with safety when you're gardening in your home and yard area. And my key on that one is, remember the old Dr. Pepper commercial. Dr. Pepper was good at 10, 2, and 4. And so my theory is, you do what gardening you need to do in our beautiful Texas weather before 10 in the morning and after 4 in the afternoon. This avoids the heat to a great extent and keeps you from getting heat stroke if you're out there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And we always want you to wear protective equipment. A nice hat never hurts anybody. Something to cover your limbs so you don't get sun poisoning or worse, sun cancers. These are primary things of importance in Texas because skin cancer is one of the largest cancer issues in our state. Okay, one of the things that you could be doing now is solarizing. If you are planning on putting in a garden, this is the perfect time of the year to solarize the area in order to kill off any weeds, any seeds that might be buried in the ground, or any potential critters that might be lurking in there. The idea behind it, of course, is you let the sun take care of all of this as much as possible. And when you're done, you have a well-prepared bed that is ready for a fall garden. And fall gardens, as most of you may know already, are some of the best ones we have in our state. Solarizing your garden involves several steps. Once you have planned where you're placing your garden, you clear off as much of the weeds and grass and plants that are currently located there. Now this is not a total, you don't have to go in there and pick every plant up. What you need to do is just clear it off as well as you can, maybe rake it up a little bit and all. Then you soak it really well. Then you place clear plastic over the whole area. And you want to use a good quality plastic. And you want to anchor it down on the corners and around the edges, depending on how large it is. And then you let Mother Nature do her work. You need to keep it on for about 6 weeks in order for the heat and that original moisture that you've left in the soil to basically steam everything that's underneath the plastic. Once you've done that, probably 80 to 90% of everything that you would have to deal with is dead and gone. So that might help if you're thinking about putting in a garden. It is one of the activities that once you do a few things, you can leave it and go home in the house and drink iced tea. Another issue that comes up over and over and over again is the issue of mowing. And it's one of those funny little things. Texas A&M recommends St. Augustine grass to be mowed at a height of 3 inches. Most people balk at this because they think they're going to have to mow all the time. Well, you can still get away with a weekly mowing, but it does several positive things. One of which is it keeps the roots cool. St. Augustine grass will do much better if its roots are cool. It will also help to crowd out things that you don't want growing in there. If you mow St. Augustine too closely, what you're doing is exposing the root systems to the harsh sun and opening the way for some possible diseases that might creep in, like the fungal diseases, which I'll talk about in just a minute. Or you might open it up for the weed seeds that have embedded themselves or flown in from your neighbors or whatever, and they will have an optimum chance to sprout. So keep that in mind. And one of the things that I get all the time is people are saying, I've got this St. Augustine grass, and I mow all the time, and I fertilize all the time, and I water all the time, and now I've got all this other stuff creeping in. And it tends to be something like a Bermuda grass that is creeping in. Bermuda grass is an ideal grass. It is actually covers about 98% of the planet, but it is very invasive. And if you mow your St. Augustine too short, Bermuda grass is one of the things that's probably going to appear, and we'll find it much more advantageous to take over because it likes to be mowed at 1 inch to 1.5 inches. Okay, one of the things that I did want to talk about is funguses. Funguses are getting their head start already. We've had strange rain, we've had strange heat, we've had all of these optimum conditions for fungal diseases to take root in many of our different plants. We have fig rust, we have lantana rust, we have all kinds of rusts that appear. Those rusts are funguses, and that's one of the issues that comes with high heat and high humidity. So it's not something that you can easily avoid in Texas, but you can control them. They do respond well to fungicides, which are commercially available. One of the things that you might want to consider is what to plant in July. Believe it or not, now is the time to start seeding bluebonnet seeds. You can sow bluebonnet seeds from now to January, but the bluebonnets and the Indian blankets and all of the things that everybody loves to see in the springtime take about 6 to 8 months to actually set their plant and then produce enough to actually do a beautiful flowering. So keep that in mind. Right now, you can also sow marigolds, pansies, sunflowers, and zinnias, all from seed, because they will take the heat at this time of year, even as small plants. You usually don't think about it, but plants like colas, geraniums, salvias, and vincas can keep your summer look going into fall if you plant them now. More than likely, you will see these available in the garden centers and the big box stores as plants. And once you get them in and watered and established, they will do beautifully until the fall. In the vegetable area, you might want to consider the field pea types, black-eyed peas, things of that nature. Pumpkins and squashes can be planted now. Then, of course, you can also do cucumbers, eggplants, okra, pepper plants, and sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes in particular are one of the things that love to get planted when it's really, really hot. And they do make a beautiful... Okay, we have another question. How often should we water our avocado plant? I'm presuming this is either a small tree in a pot or it's just getting started. And that brings us to pot plant gardening.
It's in the ground.
It's in the ground, even better. Okay, you're trying to get it established, and most plants, if they are to 1.5 inches of water every week. If you have an irrigation system, you could set it up so you have these little tuna cans or catfish cans and set them around and where your sprinklers are, and when you get it, fill up the can with 1 inch of water, then you know how long that takes, and then you can just set your timers for that in the future. If not, you want to do a deep drenching of water into that newly established plant, particularly for the first year. What you're trying to do is get the root system to build a significant base for the plant to grow and eventually to fruit. I'm presuming that you know that avocados take time before they will start producing the way that you expect them to. But another thing you can do with the watering situation, and this has to do with mulch, and when you build a mulch around a tree, you do not want to touch the trunk of the tree. You will see this if you're driving down a road somewhere they have landscaped. They call them mulch volcanoes, where the tree trunk is in the center and you've got this high pile of mulch going down in a cascade. Wrong, absolutely wrong. What you want is to build a little moat, like a berm of mulch, about several inches to a foot outside of the trunk of the tree. Then you fill that with water. You let it soak down, you fill it again. Anyway, that's how you know where you're getting the deeper water, because you can fill up that berm and it'll look like a moat for a few minutes until it soaks in. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Another question, can I grow baby's breath here? Yes, you can, but you don't try to do it in July. Baby's breath is more of a winter plant here. A lot of things that people grew up north or from east or west coasts or whatever don't necessarily translate as well here, particularly south of I-10, because our climate conditions here start to go towards the tropical. So things like petunias that you might think of as spring and early summer plants are actually winterish plants here. Now they might, if you have great conditions, they might drag on a little bit longer. But generally, if you can think of those early spring plants that you do like so much, that you remember from up north, then more than likely it will be a fall and winter plant here. I will tell you, if you're a new transplant to our area, that peonies just will not work and lilacs will not work. But a great lilac substitute is our own Vitex, which is one of our Texas superstars. It's Vitex. It makes a huge bush. It has lilac-looking flowers. It smells a little of camphor, and it will flower about 3 seasons of the year, once it's established. So keep that in mind. Okay. Got any more questions? Okay, then I'll move on. Oh yes, one of the projects that you need to be doing before 10 in the morning and after 4 in the afternoon is to deadhead. And for those of you who may be new to the gardening world, deadhead simply means plucking your spent flowers off of your plants, like your bush, like your rose bush. The roses, once they fry in our summer sun, you just cut those back. Same thing with crepe myrtles. Same thing with the Vitex. Those dead flowers are going to be producing seed in some things like the Vitex. But they're not really bad. They're just unsightly to a great extent. And actually trimming them up will help to invigorate the plant. And it will certainly look a lot more attractive. The crepe myrtles will possibly put on another show if you are able to get those deadheaded and nicely fed. One of the other things you want to keep in mind is shallow rooted things. Azaleas, camellias, gardenias, plants of that nature have very shallow root systems. And so in our heat, if you're not getting a major thunderstorm in our time of year, they do suffer from lack of water. And of course with azaleas, this is the time of year when they're starting to put on their growth and bud for next spring's show. So you want to make sure that they are being kept happy while they're dealing with the Texas summer heat. To a great extent, that's what happens a lot in July and August, is everything kind of goes dormant. So it's one of my friends once said, it doesn't necessarily go like winter up north, it just turns browner. And that can happen. And it usually happens as a result of drought. If we get a lot of steady rains on a regular basis, you aren't going to see that. But things are going to, the heat will also help to kind of make them take a step back and say, okay, we'll wait for October when it's nicer out here. So if it looks like things are struggling and you have done all the watering you can and everything, a little trimming back may help. And you also can just kind of bide your time and different spot. That reminds me about pot plants. A lot of people like to have pot plant arrangements on their patios, on their front walks or whatever. This is a particular time of the year for the pot plants to struggle. They may need watering every single day. If you're able to keep the pot plants in a shady spot most of the time with maybe some early morning sun, that will be ideal. Okay, got another question. What mix do I need to build my flower garden? Oh, that's a good question. All right. It has to do with buying soil. Now, if you are going to have a flower garden or a vegetable garden that you are building from scratch and you are using like a raised bed or creating a new thing, our gumbo clay is not ideal for virtually anything. You need to have it broken up. If you're putting in a raised bed and you go to the garden centers and you get what is called garden soil, that does not mean that it is ready for planting plants into it. What it has to do with is what it's made up of. Like I mentioned, we mostly have gumbo clay here in our part of Texas. If you get down towards the water, you might have a sandier clay or sandy, complete sand. You mix the two together and you get a mix of sandy clay. And that sandy clay frequently with just a little bit of humus or mulch or things of that nature, loam, that will make up what's called garden soil that they sell at the garden centers. However, it does not have nutrients in it. So if you're going to build a generic vegetable bed or a flower bed or whatever, you can get the garden soil, but make sure that you have some kind of compost to add to it. If you are going to be doing flowers or vegetables that take more acid in their soil, and you can find that out by, like I said, going to the Texas Superstar site or going to one of the garden books that says, for example, blueberries take a lot of acid soil. Most generic vegetables and flowers take kind of a right in the middle of the acid versus alkaline range, but there are some that take a little more of the acid end of it. So appropriately set up for the plants that you're going to do. If you're going to do a flower bed and it has no particular requirements, then you want something that is in the 6 to 7 range on the acid and alkaline scale, the pH factor. If you are doing something like blueberries or azaleas or something of that nature, then you want something that's a little more acidic, like 7.5. So that's just one of the things that you can do. If you have some time and you are building this flower bed, for example, and you can give it a few weeks before you put things in, you might want to consider getting a soil test. A soil test is a very easy way to determine what's missing in the soil, whether it be a vegetable bed, whether it be your lawn, whether it be someplace that you're planting a small little orchard. The Texas A&M has a website that you can go in and you can download a soil test form with instructions on how to do it. And you can also Google soil test, and we'll get all kinds of YouTube videos on how to dig the little spots and get the samples and stir it up and everything. You can mail that off. It's a good time. This is a good time to do it because the turnaround time is much faster. If you wait till February and March, your turnaround time is way past the time when the tomatoes should have been planted. So anyway, a soil test will cost you about $10, and they will send you back a computerized printout of what's missing in your soil, and then you are able to amend that soil to give it the optimum conditions for your flowers or your vegetables or your fruit trees. So keep that in mind. Any more questions at this point? Okay. Well, I have, some of you may be familiar with Randy Lemon. Randy Lemon is a radio gardening host who has had a program for many, many years in our Houston area. And he has just come out with his new book. And he also has a Facebook page, and it's Lemon, L-E-M-M-O-N, if you want to check him out. But he did have something on, oh, this is another thing. I saw this in the Lazy Gardener's online website. The Lazy Gardener online is Brenda Best Smith, and she used to be the Houston Post gardening columnist for many, many years. And she is now retired, and she does this web page. And she noted Randy's new book, and he had the 10 worst things to happen in our gardening world. Number 10, I feel like Jay Leno, the annual crepe myrtle massacre, a battle we may never win. Butchering crepe myrtles persists to keep crews busy in the winter months. And if you are a person who knows about crepe myrtles, you know what he's talking about. This has to do with the pruning and the way you prune crepe myrtles in order to keep them from having those ugly little knots with the sprouts coming out of them. That's crepe myrtle. Number 9, here's a new one. Zoysia should be our turf grass. 25 years ago, a southern turf grass that needs less fertilizer, less water, and no more chemicals for fungal diseases or insect pressures. It's just one of the things that everybody knows about St. Augustine, and they think that's the ideal. It's not necessarily the ideal for us, and so it's zoysia may be something you might want to look into. Number 8, new home builder landscapes are simply the worst. Most home builders scrape up the dirt and clay on which the home was built, then plop in the cheapest plants. They cover up that horrible excuse for a raised bed with dyed mulch, further poisoning the soil. And I'm sure anybody in a new home development knows what they're talking about. And our caller who had the question about their flowers bed soil may be trying to amend what was done to her yard when the new home was built. 7, weed killers have not evolved. They are basically the same as they were 25 years ago. We have non-selective herbicides that kill everything, and selective targeted herbicides for broadleaf and sedge-type weeds, but no such thing as an organic, all-purpose, broadleaf weed killer. 8, mowing practices have not evolved. St. Augustine grasses are mowed too short on a consistent basis. Why grow Bermuda and thin-bladed zoysias if you're not willing to invest in a real mower that cuts over the top like they use on golf courses? 5, mulch volcanoes. Only a couple of inches of mulch is needed at the base of newly planted trees. A foot or more is a death sentence. Roots try to grow in the mulch versus the ground below. And stop planting flowers in the mulch ring as well. 4, compacted and tainted soils. When floodwaters cover lawns and landscapes for days at a time, nothing good is happening to those soils. 3. Weed and feeds with atrazine. This product should have been removed 20 years ago. It kills trees and contaminates groundwater. No matter how good you think atrazine-based weed and feeds are at killing of weeds and greening up of the grass, it's the negative things you don't see that make it such a heinous product to use on any residential lawn. 2. People don't do their own lawn care anymore. I estimate only 1 out of every 50 landscapers has education or knowledge on proper care practices. This is why we see so many diseases and weeds being shared from yard to yard. Number 1, the worst thing, dyed mulch. Mulch should 1. Reduce weeds, 2. Conserve moisture, 3. Add organic matter back to the soil. None of the dyed mulch helps to build back organic matter into the soil. They are almost always made of chipped up wood like pallets and discarded timbers and then dyed. Even if it is dyed with something organic, it's still a dye and it's still leaching into the soil. Start using a more native or natural hardwood mulch. If landscapers refuse, they should be fired immediately. Okay, I think that we've had enough excitement for one evening. I certainly hope you've enjoyed this, and I will give a little plug. There is another live Facebook program coming next week for the summer reading program, and we hope you'll tune in then. Thank you very much.